So, how long does a branding process take? Well, typically for us, it takes between 4 to 6 weeks. Now, if you're a big FTSE 500 company watching this, which is highly unlikely, but you never know, you'd be looking at a lot longer stretch than that. But for us, for the types of companies and businesses we deal with, it's typically between 4 to 6 weeks. So let me just quickly take you through the process and the sort of milestone points throughout the process and explain what you get at the end of the branding process. So the first part, as we discussed, is the insight and understanding phase. So we'll have the discovery workshop. Then we'll go away and distill down all of those key insights and create a verbal narrative. And once we feel comfortable we've got that, we'll present that back to the business so that we're talking about the story of the company, a piece of copy that clearly communicates what the company stands for, the values of the business, the character of the business, almost the pillars, if you like, of the business, so the key things that the business does every day and why those are really important. And also the difference really of the business, how it's different in the marketplace and how it can own a position in that marketplace. So that generally takes between 1 to 2 weeks. Now, if we've done our jobs properly, then hopefully the client will be like, this is absolutely bang on, this is everything we discussed in the workshop, it makes total sense, crack on. If we get the green light on that, then we go back to the agency and that informs the creative brief. So we'll brief the creative department with almost the strategic thinking, if you like, and then they'll go away and explore and develop creative concepts around the verbal part of the brand. Now that will generally take between 1 to 2 weeks, which will take us up to about 4 weeks, and we'll present back what we like to call sort of creative territories. So they aren't completely drilled down creative roots. What they are is a mixture of mood boards and concepts, if you like. So we'll look at a logo identifier and we'll look at not just one but options. If we feel like we found one that really clicks, then we'll focus more on that, but we'll show a range of different sort of inspiration around that. The same with the tone, so the sort of words and the language and the tone of voice and the messages that will come from that. Assets, so whether that's photography, colour, typography, iconography, illustration, whatever that might be, we'll start to explore that. And also campaigns, so that would be potentially what it could look like in an ad or in a website or on the side of a van, depending on the sort of business it is. So we will tend to look at presenting 2 to 3 of those creative territories back, and we'll generally like to come to the client's offices and present them in person, printed out. And that sounds crazy, but they must be printed out. We never like to present creative work on screen. It just doesn't have the same effect. We want to print it out, stick it on the wall, and let the client get close to it and feel it, touch it, look at it. I don't know why it's voodoo, but it's really true, and it's really important for us to do that. Generally, if we've done our jobs properly, what we find is that the client and however many are in there, potentially 3 up to 8 people, they'll get drawn to one idea, and if we've done our jobs properly, they'll get really excited about one idea and they'll start running off and discussing ideas and concepts about how they could feed that into the business. And if you look at the creative team, or however many creators are in the room at the time, you'll notice a big fat Cheshire cat on their face, because that is why we do our jobs. When we see the feedback from the client where they are so excited and super engaged and they're just really happy and just love everything, you know that you've done a really good, intelligent job. So that's why we love what we do. So that takes us up to about 4 weeks. Then we'll go back. There's always changes and tweaks to be made. We'll present back again about a week later, a more refined version of that territory. So there won't be any sort of mood board stuff now. We're getting into sort of really funneling it down. So we'll define what the logo is. We'll start to define what the photography or imagery is, or whatever it might be. These aren't guidelines, but they're getting close to it. We'll show the development, and the client will again probably make a few tweaks to it, but they're like, yep, we're right on the right track now. Then we'll go into full-on guideline So if you're going through a branding project now and the agency's tried to palm you off with like a 5-page guideline, that isn't branding guidelines. That's you want to be having a word with them about that. You want to be looking at something between 25 to 30 pages. And in that guideline, there should be a comprehensive overview of the business, the verbal part of the business up front, so explaining exactly why the business exists, the verbal part of the brand. And then secondary is the visual framework, so the logo, the imagery. And it goes into depth about explaining what it is, how to use it, and more importantly, how not to use it. So that becomes your sort of brand Bible, if you like. So in a year's time, if you're working with a PR agency or another marketing company, you've got an exhibition coming up and you need someone to build an exhibition stand, you can give them this document and say, right, this is us, this is what we stand for, this is who we are. And you're immediately one step ahead of someone at that show that just hasn't done that, because that exhibition company can get a really clear understanding of the type of business you are immediately, and ultimately the outcome of what they create for you is going to be so much more on target than for another business that hasn't done that, basically. So that would bring us up to our sort of 6 weeks. So ultimately, there's lots of different ways and different ways you can sell and package up branding. So if generally what you do is you get your guideline at the end of the process. You would get your electronic logo files, and you would get a range of assets. So, for example, that would be email signatures, social media graphics, artwork stationery if you needed it, and potentially sort of a PowerPoint, branded PowerPoint template. Now, a lot of agencies would then say, okay, that's that project, and then they would quote, if you, for example, like what they've done and you wanted them to build the website, if they have that capability, they would charge that out as a separate project, and that makes a lot of sense for certain instances. We actually, for us, we want to build long-term relationships with our clients, I guess, as a lot of businesses do. But we also want to provide real flexibility, and because of the nature of our business and the scale of it, we can provide not just the brand process, but we can then deliver a website and sort of first email marketing campaign, and we can lump it all into one project. Because the thing about a branding project is you can give guidelines and logos and stuff, and then say, there you go, off you go. But actually, the implementation can be a real letdown if it's not done by the same agency who's almost lived and breathed it. So we try, and the way we look at it is, look, we want to work with you for a year after you've launched this, because it needs to bed into the marketplace. People aren't just going to pick it up and run with it off the bat, and people need to understand how it's going to work and how it's going to live and breathe, because there's always tweaks and changes to anything. So we want to build out the idea of, we'll do the brand work for you for 6 weeks, but ultimately we'd like to work for you for a minimum of 6 months to help roll this out into the marketplace, to help bed it in and root it in to the marketplace. And then after that, you feel like, do you know what, you want a fresh perspective on it, that's absolutely fine. Or, do you know what, you've done a great job, we're all set up, we've got someone internally that can run things from here, we might want to pick up with you, every 6 months for a couple of days consultant, just to check that everything's still on track, whatever it might be. But the bottom line is, we want to make things as convenient as possible for our customers. Hence why we're doing these videos as well, to hopefully make the process much easier for you. So 4 to 6 weeks, and I'm hoping that really clearly explains the process that you go through.